Hey guys, this is Brent from Woods Counseling, and I am here with Marlena Miller from
Next Level Life Counseling and Coaching.
Right. I always kind of forget the counseling and coaching part, right?
Right. Yes.
You just want to say counseling.
Yep.
But we're going to be talking about couples counseling or relationship enrichment.
Relationship enrichment, relationship coaching, couples work. There are all sorts of names for it. The work that I do with couples typically has more of a coaching energy to it, a little bit of a coaching feel. But essentially, my credentials are LPC. So I am a counselor at my core. My style is just a little more coach-like. So that's what I tend to call my couples work.
Cool. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's it like in a couple session with you?
Well, I would say that when a new couple reaches out to me to potentially work with me, I'll bring them in the first session. Typically, what I want to know first is about your love story. I want to know how you guys met, how you fell in love, how did you build the foundation of your relationship, what was it about each other that you were most interested in, what did you respect, admire, what did you find adorable or sexy about each other? That's what I really want to know first. I'll be honest, oftentimes people come and they want to lead with problems, and I just don't think that that's as effective. So I want to start out with what was it in the beginning that got you guys together in the first place, because that brings us back to, the magical period, the chemical bath period of why you chose each other in the first place. So I usually like to spend a little bit of time on that. And then typically I want to observe some interactions, look for patterns, kind of what I call the dance that couples do. What are those patterns of relating, communicating, etc. Because a lot of times that's the data that we really need to kind of plan where we are going. We have to know where we're starting to know what steps we need to take to move forward. And so that includes kind of asking the couples what their vision is or what their goals are in clinical terminology. Where do you want your relationship to be? What do you want it to look like? What do you want it to feel like? And that really kind of paints a picture for the work that we have to do.
Right. Sounds pretty thorough.
It is certainly thorough. It takes, we don't always cover all of that in one session. Sessions are 50 minutes. And so depending on how open and, how comfortable people are in that initial session kind of determines the rate at which we move through those elements, those pieces. But essentially my goal in the first session is to connect with my clients and to create a safe space for them to come and talk openly and honestly, because we certainly can't do effective work together when people are holding back or, not honest or not vulnerable. And we'll get to that a little bit later, what those things are and the impact that they have on the relationship as a whole. But including the things that I already mentioned, like finding out about your love story, finding out about your vision, where you want your relationship to go or what you want it to be. We look for those patterns, and we really look for a decision or commitment. So all change happens in a moment of decision.
Right.
We all know that. If we decide something and then we don't follow that up with action, then it's more like stating a preference, not making a decision. And so I really encourage my clients to make a decision and to follow through. So make a commitment. This takes work. Relationships take work. Therapy takes work. Coaching takes work. It requires an investment of your time, your energy. I give homework assignments almost every single session because it's critical that you take what we talk about, what we work on in this room, and take it out of this room into your life.
Right.
I tell my clients all the time, this is not a magical sofa. This is not a magical office. I do not sprinkle pixie dust on you when you leave. It really is your responsibility to incorporate what we talk about, what you learn into your life. Otherwise, it's not helpful.
It's kind of funny. I say the exact same thing. This is not a magic session.
Right.
It does take a lot of work, and you're only here for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So
50 minutes.
Right.
Ish.
I say an hour, 50
Right.
minutes-ish. You got 50 minutes to an hour, but...
Yeah, I try to stick to 50 minutes.
Right.
Do my best.
Okay, so...
And then, of course, well, I didn't finish. So once you get that decision, that's really where the work begins, right? So the first initial kind of like pieces of that are gathering information, gathering some history, getting some information about where you want to go, how I can help. And then, of course, from that point on, once we have your commitment and you make that decision to do the work, then it's all about learning some skills, some techniques, teaching you some tools. There's a huge educational component. Unfortunately, most people aren't explicitly taught or trained on how to have healthy relationships. So we don't know what we don't know. The only way we can know what we don't know is really for us to be exposed to new information. So there's a knowing something different component that's really essential.
Sure.
So we start, working on those techniques and working on skills, communication models, how to communicate effectively and clearly. We start working on some of those foundational things that maybe were there at some time that people stopped doing, or maybe they were on shaky ground from the beginning and now they're a couple years in or 10 years in and are finally aware of the shakiness of the foundation. So it's really never too late to start the process. Sooner is always better than later, of course. But it's never too late. And so a lot of times I do get questions like, well, I just don't know. Maybe it's too late for it to work. Maybe it's just too far gone. And you and I kind of briefly talked about that the other day.
Yep.
My response to that is very simple. What if it's not too late? What if it's not too far gone? What will you potentially lose if you quit prematurely? What will you potentially lose? What will be the impact on yourself, your partner, your family, your children, generations to come, if you don't commit to do the work and give it all you've got?
Right. It really does come down to making that decision and making that moment stick.
Absolutely. Exactly. So doing the work, being committed to doing the work consistently, that's where we start closing the gap between where you are, where you want to be, what your relationship is like, what you want your relationship to be like.
Right.
That's where the work really is.
Right. And I think that's the consistent part is really, really important because you need to make sure that whatever you try, you do it consistently.
Absolutely.
Not just, I'm going to do it 2 days a week, or, if you have this one thing that your therapist told you to try, we did it 2 days, that's not going to be realistic for any type of change in your relationship.
Sure.
It's going to be really important to do it every day if that's what was suggested from the session.
Absolutely. Like you and I were just talking about Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins is a very well-known speaker, motivational coach, success coach. He has all kinds of titles, but essentially he's a genius in the area of personal growth, change, success,
right,
etc. And he says that what is the key to learning and mastery? Do you remember? Repetition,
yes.
right? So to learn something, to really learn something, means to practice repeatedly.
Right. I need to repeat that because I just saw it 5 minutes ago.
That's right. So the key to mastery is repetition. Exactly.
Right.
So if we really want to master the skills required to have a successful relationship, then we've got to implement those things, those new patterns into our lives every day.
All right. So when you're first meeting with people and you're talking about the love story, so how is that incorporated into therapy, and why do you start with that?
Gotcha. Okay. So for me, it's important to know the history. It's important to know what the process was like that brought these two humans together. I believe that people cross our paths for a reason.
Sure.
I believe that we all have something to offer each other. And so if you end up in a relationship, no matter how the outcome turns out, I think that we all have something to offer each other. But I am personally looking for those elements that kind of resulted in these people pairing up in the first place. So, the obvious thing is proximity is required. For any relationship to be established, proximity has to be there, right? So you don't start dating somebody that you've never met or that hasn't been on your radar. That's even in the age of like online dating, like somebody has to cross your screen or your path for that relationship to even have a chance, right? Mm-hmm. So proximity is one thing. Chemistry. When somebody's on your radar, you have an encounter, whether it be online or in person. there's a pretty quick determination of whether or not there's chemistry between two people, right? Chemistry is not always sexual, which is a common misconception, but somebody that you just jive with or vibe with. Like, I like your energy. I like the way that I feel in your presence, that kind of thing. So that's what I'm talking about when I say chemistry. Of course, if you do establish that chemistry exists, that can lead to attraction. So once you learn a little bit more about a person, you have a few interactions, some conversations, you see elements of their personality come out. That's kind of where you can determine whether or not attraction is there as well. That, I think, is kind of what takes us to maybe a decision to, like, date somebody, right? So you might not be in an exclusive relationship yet, but you've decided, hey, I like you enough to kind of learn some more about you.
Right.
So that's what I call, like, the discovery phase. I think dating is all about discovery. One of my mentors many years ago taught me that. It's a critical piece. Dating is essentially about discovering what you like, what you don't like, what you like about yourself, what you don't like about yourself. A lot of times other people are mirrors for us.
Right.
So you may have chemistry and attraction with somebody, and there might be something about their personality or their behaviors that brings about some icky feeling in you. Mm-hmm. I think the responsible thing, the mature thing to do is kind of investigate that a little bit, pay attention to it. It might not be because that person sucks. It might be because that person is a great match and a great mirror for you, and creates an opportunity for you to grow and refine yourself in some way.
And I think it's really important to say in that discovery phase, not to go too quickly, to take the time to investigate, because I think I've seen a lot of people just shove it under the rug. Those feelings, the icky feelings that you talked about, right? And shove it under the rug, and they're just going to keep going, oh, I'm not going to pay attention to that. And then it turns out to be a bad thing later on down the road.
It could. Yep, that's right. And so, once you get, I think, past that, well, I don't think you ever really get past the discovery phase, because we all have, continuous opportunities to learn and grow from each other.
Right.
But that initial discovery phase where you kind of decide, all right, I like you enough to keep you around for a while. Like, let's see how this plays out, right? Mm-hmm. Then I think one of the really critical elements to see how deep that relationship can go is safety. I talk with my clients a great deal about the importance of safety, because one, it falls in one of the categories of one of our fundamental human needs, and that's called protection, or that's what I call it. So safety is physical safety, obviously. Does this person, like, beat up on me? Does this person, grab me or push me, or, those things? Obviously, that's a deal breaker.
Right.
But also the component of emotional safety is so important that a lot of people either aren't familiar with, or they don't recognize when it's there or when it's not there until they have a reason to pay attention to it. So safety, I think, is the critical component for vulnerability to occur. And what we know, some of you may be familiar with Brene Brown's work. I know that you and your wife both are familiar with Brene Brown's work. Brene Brown is a brilliant researcher and professor in Texas, and she is a wonderful author. She has many really good books. She researches the hell out of vulnerability.
She does.
And courage and the elements of deep connection.
Right.
The deep longing that we all have to be known and loved. Right? So in order to be really loved, you have to be known, you have to be seen, and that requires vulnerability. So that is a really important piece in the process of establishing a relationship. When you test the waters a little bit, you think that there's some safety and you're vulnerable, then you have to check. Do I still feel safe?
Right.
I've been very vulnerable. Do I still feel safe? Am I okay? Are you okay? Are we okay? And so once you establish that, then what really becomes of that is trust. So when you establish trust because you know that you can be safe and vulnerable with this person, then you're more likely to continue to invest in that relationship. Right. So essentially what we all crave is that connection, that belonging, that love. And in order for that to really happen, we have to have true intimacy. And that is something else that Brene Brown talks about a lot in her material. So vulnerability is a pillar, trust is a pillar, intimacy is a pillar. Those things are required for true connection to occur. So that's kind of the process. We get intimacy, we get connection. When we have true connection, authentic connection, when we know we can be our full, authentic, real, raw selves and be loved and received and, appreciated, then that is ultimately what meets that fundamental human need that we all have of love, belonging, connection. I call it the people need because that kind of sums up the idea that we were all designed for connection with other humans. And really, without all of those pieces, I just don't think that it's as likely. I don't think it's as possible for us to have that deep level of belonging and love and connection that we all are designed for.
So how do you know if you have that kind of connection with those different pillars, right? The strong emotional connection to that other person?
That's a great question. So I actually have compiled a list. I'm a big fan of alliteration, so I just came up with a list of words that all start with C, coincidentally. And these are words that describe the way that I conceptualize connected, healthy couples.
Okay.
So these are things that you can actually use to measure how successful your relationship is or how healthy or connected you and your partner are. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to run off kind of quickly through this list, and feel free to add whatever thoughts come to mind. So these are in no particular order necessarily. It's certainly not a comprehensive list, but it is some characteristics of intimate relationship, partner relationships, and the interactions that you have that can kind of help you to assess within yourself, and maybe in conversation with your partner, like, hey, how do you think we're doing at this? 1 to 10, how good are we at this? That's kind of what I have in mind there. So the first thing that I have is kind of one of those obvious ones, compatibility. What I mean by compatibility is we have some things in common. We have some similar values. We have a similar vision, maybe a similar mission. So that's the thing that is going to allow you to connect initially, is you got to have enough sameness to kind of feel familiar and comfortable with the other person.
Sure.
Okay? The other thing is complementarity. Complementarity is essentially what Tony Robbins calls polarization or polarity. So it's going to be like the yin-yang concept, the differences. So you got to be different enough to keep it interesting, right?
You can't be with the same kind of person.
Yeah, exactly. How boring would that be, right? So, I mean, I like myself a whole lot. I think we all kind of need to, but I don't want to be with a partner who's exactly like me. Like, I would get, bored as hell with that. So we need some complementarity. We need some differences to kind of keep it interesting. And that also kind of fuels passion when you have some differences. You also have some different strengths that you bring to the table. And so, one of the other things I'll talk about in a little bit is related to like a team mindset. So like, I bring some strengths to the team, you bring some strengths to the team. Together we strengthen the team.
Right.
If we have the same strengths, that means we might have some areas that we both suck at. And then who's going to bring that to the table, right?
Exactly.
So next is chemistry. We talked a little bit about that before. That's the fire, the passion, the attraction. That's an essential component. The thing that, is heartbreaking sometimes when people get together, they've been together for a while, and it takes them a while to finally acknowledge or admit that the chemistry is not there. Maybe it never was there. So that's something that's really hard to deal with. That's not going to be something that going to counseling is going to make appear, right? Unfortunately. So sometimes relationships do end because chemistry isn't there and it wasn't there. It's not something you can create like in a lab, right? So it's not a skill that you can build on necessarily. But it's certainly something that if you are looking for it, you can recognize when it's there, and hopefully you can recognize when it's not there and know that this isn't my person. Right. Okay? Next we have commitment. Okay, most people know what commitment is. Commitment, though, is commitment to each other. It's commitment to the relationship. It's also commitment to doing the work of relationship. So you can be 100% committed to your partner, meaning like, I'm not going to leave you, I'm not going to cheat on you. But are you committed to doing the work to make this relationship thrive, to make this relationship the best that it can be? That is important. Okay?
I like that one. That one's good.
The other one is companionship. I just love all these C words. Companionship. A lot of the, theories of psychology, social psychology talk about companionship as an essential piece to intimate relationships. So, most of us know some couple along the way throughout our lives that have been together for like decades, and they're like best friends, and maybe that's it. So maybe they have companionship. Maybe they don't have some of the other stuff, but they stay in that relationship because they are super significant people to each other, or they don't want to be alone, right? So this is my person. We've gotten used to each other. This is how we do life together. So that's one spin on it, but like if you think about companionship as one of the essential components to having a healthy relationship, it can't be the only one.
Right. because you still have all the other categories.
Absolutely.
That you have to make sure that those are maintained, because then if you just have companionship, you just be best friends.
Exactly. We're besties. We're roomies. Mm-hmm. And like, how many times have you encountered a couple, maybe in your practice or in your personal life, where you know without a doubt these people ain't got no spark left. Right. There's no passion. Maybe they fight.
Right.
Maybe they don't like each other. Maybe they hardly, talk about life or their visions or goals or their feelings. But they hang out together. They go out to eat together. They go to the movies together. That's the companionship component. So it can be the only one, but it is an essential one.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. I think I see it a lot more in couples where the kids are out the house and, they have to learn that new role that they have to play when it's just the two of them again.
Exactly. It's like all of a sudden we realize, oh wait, like I'm man and woman again. We're man and woman again. We're not just mom and dad.
Right.
So a lot of times you do find that in like, empty nesters or people who've experienced some life transitions. People retire. All of a sudden they're home together a whole lot more. I see that a lot.
Yeah.
So it really is, like I said, it's an essential component. The companionship component really needs to be there for the relationship to thrive. It just can't be the only thing. Otherwise, you're not really partners and lovers. You're just besties.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Next, this one is such an important one. Curiosity. So to be curious about each other, about your dreams, your hopes, your vision, not confrontational. Curious, not confrontational. This is something I have to teach people all the time, because our default a lot of times is to protect each other. To protect ourselves. And so we go into these defensive strategies. It is so much more beneficial when your partner says something or does something to prime yourself to be curious about it. Tell me more about that. What was on your mind? What are you feeling? What was that like for you? That's curious. If you say, well, why the hell did you do that? It doesn't make any sense to me that you would do that. That's what we call confrontational. Critical. Right? Yeah, so those are not the components that make a relationship and a connection thrive and deepen. But curiosity is certainly one of them. And so when we seek to understand our partner's position, we seek to understand their perspective, that requires curiosity. Cooperation. I always like to use a hyphen in the word cooperation because it emphasizes means what? Together. So right. We operate together. So we cooperate. We have a team mindset. We look for win-win outcomes, right? Our strategy, our mindset is how can we both win? If the relationship wins, we win.
Exactly.
Right? So that is kind of it's a mindset, it's a mentality kind of thing. Compassion.
Right.
Critical.
Right.
What are your thoughts on compassion?
My thoughts on compassion, the first thing that popped in my head was empathy, having empathy towards each other. I get a lot of couples that come in and they're just so focused on what wrong was done to them and very, I don't want to say incapable of understanding, but just super focused on themselves and what's been done to them, which, I do know that needs to be processed, but part of the whole process of working with a couple is for you to work on the empathy aspect of it, right? So,
sure.
Yeah.
So to be able to really see each other, to be able to really hear each other, to offer each other some compassion, some grace, some understanding. Right. So you can say, what you did sucked and it hurt me. And I know that I contributed to this situation that we've co-created. I know that I have my own responsibility in this situation that we've created. It's not that what you did is my fault, right? It's not a blame thing. It's a responsibility thing. Right. And so I think whenever we're able to show compassion for each other, it really does show that I'm willing to recognize that you're another human with feelings, experiences, maybe past pain that is stirred up in the context of this relationship. And so all behavior, this is what we know. We learned this in school. I learned this in my training long before I was a counselor. All behavior makes sense in context.
Yes.
If you want to understand a behavior, you've got to widen the lens, step back, zoom out, look at the context.
Right.
If you can understand a behavior in context, it taps into a gentle, compassionate part of ourselves.
Yeah.
that is critical, especially anytime there's any harm or betrayal or, anything like that that can break that sense of confidence that you have in your relationship or in your partner, in each other. You've got to be able to approach that with compassion. Okay, communication. So that's the buzzword in counseling, right? Couples counseling. People come to your office, they say, we need help with communication. We can't communicate. We don't communicate. We never communicate, right? What do you think is the truest of those statements? We can't communicate or we don't communicate? Don't. Why do people not communicate? They don't know how to communicate in a way that's effective.
Right.
So that's where I step in.
Or they choose not to.
Sure, there could be that. A lot of times what I believe is people don't know what they don't know. You can't, necessarily, it's not helpful to be mad at somebody for not being able to do something that they literally don't have the skills or the training to do.
Right.
So when I have couples in my office, we own that shit, okay? You can communicate. I'll help you. Let me give you some tools. This is where practice comes in, right in front of my face in the session. So I teach a model. Here's how you can cleanly, clearly, specifically communicate, right? Here's some words to use. I like to use fill-in-the-blank models. In school we talked about the whole messages, how important it is. So I teach an abbreviated version of that. I feel blank when blank happens. I need blank. It's a no-brainer. Anybody can do it. Yep. You can teach a toddler to do it. Right?
And there comes the consistency again, because you need to be consistent when you're trying these things.
Of course. So you have to do these things intentionally. If you're going to learn a new skill, that means you have to practice the hell out of it.
Right.
So repetition, 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 right? If you practice a terrible way of communicating, are you going to master that shitty way of communicating?
Yeah.
Yes. You're going to be really good at communicating badly, right?
Yeah.
We don't want that. So you do have to change the pattern. You've got to practice a better way. And then you get to the point where it's more automatic, what Tony Robbins calls mastery, right? In order to achieve mastery, you've got to practice the heck out of something many, many times consistently over time. So communication is a foundational key to enriching your relationship, making your relationship the best it can be. A lot of times it really just boils down to learning something that you've never been taught before. So totally doable. All right, now we've got courage. Okay, so we talked about Brene Brown a little bit. She talks about vulnerability. She talks about intimacy. She talks about courage. Courage, what I think of courage in the context of a relationship, acknowledging that you're afraid, but not being too afraid to own your shit. And to be vulnerable with your partner. Take responsibility for your own contribution. We kind of touched on this a couple minutes ago.
Absolutely.
So it takes a great deal of courage and inner strength, emotional muscle, to own your contribution, your responsibility to a problem, right? Years ago, probably 15 years ago, I was taught by one of my mentors, one person cannot solve a two-person problem, right?
Right.
So do you think that a lot of people have the mentality that he is to blame or she is to blame for this problem, whatever this problem is, right? So if I believe that the problem is all you, who has the power to correct or fix that problem?
Then I do, right?
Exactly. Do I have any power to contribute to that process? No, because I'm not taking any responsibility for it. That's how people get stuck. Right? There is no forward movement in that. There's no healing in that. So in order for progress to be made, both partners have to take 100% responsibility for their 50% of the problem, the relationship, whatever the scenario is. And it takes a great deal of courage to do that. It takes a great deal of courage to pick up the phone and call a coach or a therapist and say, I need some help.
Right.
Those are the people that get better, though. The people who tap into that courage, they do the thing that the majority of people won't do or can't do.
Right.
So that's how we see growth happen. That's how we see relationship enrichment happen. Because people have the courage and they make the commitment to do the work. And then they do the work consistently and they get results. Right?
Awesome.
Yeah, of course. So it's simple, not easy. Right?
Right. Simple does not always mean easy.
That's exactly
Simple actually usually is very hard.
Oftentimes the simple things are the hardest. Yes, exactly. Because of some of these things.
Right.
Because it does take a lot of courage, and it takes consistency. It takes things like that require your intentional effort. And, let's be honest, some of us are really lazy in some areas of our lives. Unfortunately, our relationships is one of those areas that's pretty common. So, obviously, you and I are both here to offer some value to our community, to help people improve their relationships. That's the legacy that they have the opportunity to leave for their children and generations to come, for the community that we live in, that we love, that we care about.
Right.
So when we start with our closest relationships and we build and strengthen those relationships, the impact is profound.
Right. And there's so many wins that can come from it. Kids are going to learn how relationships flow based off of how you can execute improvements in your relationships. So that if they can see you overcome, then that will instill some belief in them that they can actually overcome stuff in the future.
That's right. And both of us learned in developmental psychology, the profound impact of modeling, right? Yeah. Observational learning.
Yes.
Kids learn so much by what they see us do, not so much what we tell them to do.
Exactly.
Right? Unless those things are congruent. If we're telling them to do the thing that they're seeing us do, that's where the magic is, right? That's where, our modeling is the most impactful, is when it actually lines up with what we're explicitly teaching them as well. Unfortunately, a lot of times what happens is we tell them one thing and they see us do another, and that's very confusing, especially for kids whose brains aren't fully developed yet to deal with that inconsistency, right? So at the end of the day, what they see us do is going to be more impactful, I think, than the words that we tell them.
Right. As a kid growing up, I used to hear all the time from a family member, "Do as I say, not as I do," right? And
that's bullshit.
And it just totally, I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense.
That's not how it works, man.
It's not how it works, no.
Exactly. So people are well-intended, but a lot of times they say things that just don't make any sense.
Right.
So people don't know what they don't know. And we have to offer some grace, right? Because we don't know everything either. Nobody does. Okay, so the next thing is just care. And it's not just the general warm and fuzzy fluffy care, but it's literally knowing the difference between caring about each other and taking care of ourselves. So remember, like I said, we're all 100% responsible for our contribution, but we're also 100% responsible for taking care of ourselves. Self-care is one of those other buzzwords, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people have this misconception that self-care is just going to get manis and pedis or facials or massages. Yeah, sure, that's great. Self-care in that way matters, but it's not the only way. So self-care on a deeper level is attending to our own needs and owning the responsibility that we have to ourselves to get our needs met in healthy ways.
Right.
So I can care about you and know that it's not my responsibility to take care of you, and it's not your responsibility to take care of me. It's my responsibility to take care of me. So if my options are limited as far as how I get my needs met, it doesn't help anybody to put that on you. I've got to accept and embrace that responsibility for myself.
Exactly.
And when two partners do that, magic happens.
Right. You have to operate in the adult ego state, right?
Yes, indeed. Please stop parenting each other or acting like children.
Yes.
Sometimes I have clients in my office and I say, all right, I got to tell you, you guys are both interacting like a couple 7-year-olds right now. Yep. So let's make a conscious decision right now to change our state, to change this pattern, to get into your adult. How old are you? Show me. So sometimes it's just that kind of watching that pattern develop and knowing, getting some insight into what that looks like at home. And nobody wants to be walking around as a 30 or 40-year-old or 50-year-old acting like a 7-year-old or a 12-year-old. Right. Nobody wants that. But we do it in an unconscious way because we don't realize, or maybe we don't have anybody in our lives who love us enough to say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. This is what's happening right now. Out of love, I got to tell you, get your shit together, man. This isn't working well. Right? So then in that moment where you decide, oh yeah, let me shift back into my adult state. Let me shift back into my adult self. And then we have the potential for, quality communication, quality connection, those kinds of things. Because two adults are going to relate in a different way from a parent and a child, right?
Right.
The dynamic is completely different. So you're right on about that. Okay, the other thing is consideration. So what I mean by consideration, I mean consideration of each other's needs, consideration of each other's feelings. That is not controlling and not being closed off. So when I'm considerate of you, your feelings, and your needs, then I'm not just going to get pissed off about what you're doing to meet your needs and close myself off to punish you. I'm not going to try and control your behavior. I'm just going to like literally have consideration for you as another human that I care about, another human that I love. I want the best for you, so I want you to attend to your needs. I want you to do what's good for you. And that doesn't have to take anything away from me necessarily. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's really being considerate of each other. Collaboration is another really important one.
Absolutely.
So collaboration, the thing that I wrote down is these couples dream together. They build together. They collaborate. They're not in competition with one another, right? So it's kind of similar to cooperation, but it's distinct in a different way to me. So when we collaborate, just like we're doing right now, we're collaborating.
You feed off of one another to help
Absolutely.
get the bigger picture.
That's right. So we're both contributing to this vision or this goal that we have. We're building something together because there's something that we both care about. So if it's a married couple we're talking about or a dating couple, we both care about the same thing. We care about our relationship. We care about our household. We care about our family, whatever it is. So we literally are going to both invest pieces of ourselves so that the outcome can be even better than if we were doing it on our own.
Absolutely.
Okay, conflict resolution. Conflict resolution, so important. I describe this as it's a we'll work it out attitude.
Yeah, right.
Something will come up. Conflict happens. Conflict is guaranteed. Conflict is guaranteed. Okay? When people come into my office and say, we just have so much conflict, I say, well, yeah.
Right.
That's not a problem. Having conflict is not a problem. If
there's no conflict, there's a bigger problem.
Potentially, yes. If there's no conflict, there's no growth.
Right.
So if you're growing together, you got to have some conflict.
Right.
The growth happens in the moments where you decide, what are we going to do with this conflict? How are we going to work this out? How are we going to work together to solve some problems, right? So conflict resolution is so critical, and it's a skill set that many, many people don't have because we're never taught how to do that, how to do it effectively, right? With love and grace. So conflict is guaranteed, guys. Having conflict in your relationship is not a problem. The problem is if you don't ever resolve or work shit out. If the same conflict keeps coming up and coming up and coming up and you never have any forward movement, if you just sweep it under the rug, if you just give it a day and pretend like it didn't happen, what you don't resolve, you repeat, right? So if it's not resolved, it's going to keep coming up, and then decades down the road, you're still going to be fighting about the same stuff. How exhausting is that, right?
Really exhausting.
Absolutely.
But there's so many people that do get into that cycle.
It's a pattern. It's a cycle. That's right. So learning how to manage and resolve conflict is really, really an important piece of loving each other well. Okay, this one's a good one. Celebrate each other. So that means celebrating each other's wins, celebrating each other's progress, really recognizing when you're doing something amazing, I celebrate the heck out of it. I tell you, I see this in you. It's amazing. I think it's incredible.
Right.
I love what you're doing with the place. I love how you have this vision. I love how you take care of our children. I love how you show up for your friends.
Right.
You celebrate those things. You got a promotion. Yes, let me clap for you.
Right.
Like, let's celebrate this together. Life is worth celebrating.
Right.
There are so many moments that can be celebrated, and there's a way that the relationship is nurtured when you know that you're in this with a partner who's going to celebrate the heck out of you.
And then you're focusing on the positive.
Absolutely.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next thing I have, Brent, is challenge and inspire each other to grow. This is huge. This is one of those markers of mature relationships. Right? People who have done the work in some of these other areas.
Right.
People who have the internal resources, the comfortable in their own skin, the confidence, the certainty, the I know what value I bring to the table, I know what value you bring to the table. We're better together. We challenge each other. We inspire each other to grow and develop and keep improving, right? Keep contributing. Keep making ourselves better. Keep making our relationship, our family, our community, our world better. This is such an important piece. So if you have a partner who challenges you, you can get pissed off about it, or you can look at it as a blessing and opportunity. If you challenge me to grow, I am grateful for that. There are so many couples who either don't challenge each other because
Right.
they're complacent in how things are. They don't look forward to, advancing or enriching the connection or the relationship or the lives that they have. There are also tons of people who experience someone who challenges them as an aversive thing, as a problem.
Right.
And so there's a lot of personal growth work that has to be done in order for you to be the kind of partner that ultimately I think we all want and we all want to be, right? And so there's a lot of that personal development work that's required. And that essentially is why many of the couples that I work with, I actually do individual coaching with them as well.
Good.
Because in talking about some of these things, that's where, what you'll find is that obviously some partners have this strength and maybe this area that needs some work, or the other partner might have the strength in the area that one partner needs some work, and they need some work in the area the other partner has a strength in, right? You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
And so there are some targeted ways to kind of become a better version of yourself and bring that better version of yourself into that relationship to enrich the relationship as a whole. The relationship can only be as good or as healthy as the people in it. You agree?
I totally agree.
Yeah. So that is the super, super important. And the last thing that I have on my list, Brent, is connection. This is what all of these other things are about. This is what it boils down to. Healthy couples are connected couples. That's a no-brainer.
Right.
But a lot of times people have the question of like, well, what does that look like? How do I do that? How do we get there? And that's why I put this last on the list.
Right, because a lot of those other things will help you get there.
Exactly. All of those other things are like the building blocks that essentially result in this solid connection where you have trust, where you have intimacy, where you have all of the things that make relationship beautiful and wonderful, that help us to be our best selves. I certainly know that I am made better by the people I choose to surround myself with if they have some of those characteristics and traits that I admire, that I appreciate, that I want to be, that I want to exhibit myself, right? So we choose who we put in our lives, who we surround ourselves with, and it's our responsibility to choose people who make us better.
Right.
And people who we can make better. When we do all of that, we have this solid sense of connection. I think that's how you know you got your person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm thinking about my wife and all of these things, and she does a great job at just sort of spurring me on and encouraging. She's definitely an encourager.
Your biggest fan.
Yeah, all the time.
And how beautiful is that?
It's amazing.
How profound of a difference does it make when you go home at the end of a day? Like doing what we do, sometimes our days are hard. Sometimes our days are exhausting,
No
right?
doubt.
So we bring this energy to the table. We bring this energy and this passion and this desire, to help people and serve people and add value for people. And, sometimes days are long and sometimes they're intense and sometimes they're heartbreaking. People bring their pain to the table and we sit there with them and we hold space for them. And that does require an investment of our energy. So sometimes we get home at the end of the day and we might be a little depleted. How critical is it for you to go home to somebody who's going to be a soft place for you to land? A place who's going to say, honey, I admire what you're doing so much. You're really killing it. Keep at it. I believe in you. That's what you're saying you have.
That's exactly what
That's
I'm saying.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's definitely something to celebrate.
Absolutely. Celebration, right?
Yes, indeed.
Get that positivity going.
That's right. Exactly. The attitude of gratitude goes a long way.
That's right.
No matter what's going on with all this COVID stuff, with all the social unrest, there are all these things. There's so much pain. And what we can certainly do is listen better. We can understand the perspectives of people who are hurting. We can validate those feelings. We can support people. We strengthen people by showing up for them, by listening to them, by celebrating them. We do all those things. That's all part of the solution.
Mm-hmm.
So who wants to be a part of the solution? Who wants to be a part of the problem? These things today are just kind of tangible, measurable ways that we can assess within each other, within ourselves, within our couple relationships. How we doing?
Yeah. So that's one of the things that you can do, right? Ask yourself, how are we doing? And have a conversation about it.
Please have a conversation about it. If you need help having a conversation about it, that's important data for you to know.
Yeah.
If you need some help having a conversation, please get some help having a conversation. It's critical.
So how can people reach you if they have had that conversation and maybe want to take a step further?
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a good question. So I have a Facebook business page. It's Next Level Life Counseling and Coaching. I have a website. It's nextlevellife.org with a hyphen between the words. So next-level-life.org. My phone number is 337-912-3043. And I also have a listing on Psychology Today, which a lot of people are pretty familiar with. You can do a quick Google search. My name is Marlena Miller. You can search that, and most of my contact information will come up pretty quickly. Sure. But all of those are equally good ways to reach me, and I'm more than happy to help. I love working with couples. The work that I do typically has a little bit of a coaching flavor, but know that I am a therapist. I'm a counselor, a licensed professional counselor, just like Brent. And one of the areas that I'm super passionate about is helping couples take their relationship to the next level, to a deeper level, so it's more satisfying. Because essentially my belief is the quality of your life equals the quality of your relationships. If you want to improve the quality of your life, you know where to start.
Awesome. I appreciate you being on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, it's fun doing these kinds of things. Check the comments below, and I have all of her information down there, her website, Facebook page. And so if you want to reach out, then just check the comment box. So thanks for
Thanks for
being
tuning
here.
in.
Yeah. And check the Next Therapy Matters segment on our YouTube or Facebook page. So thanks again.